Hello, welcome. I am Ann Bocock, and this is Between the Covers. This is the WXEL Book Club, and we also want to thank our partner, Murder on the Beach Mystery Bookstore in Delray Beach. Thank you all for coming here today. I'm very glad to see every one of you here at the WXEL studios, and especially because you are in for a treat today. Deborah Sharp is here.
Thank you.
A well-deserved hand. Like the main character in her Mace Bauer mysteries, Deborah Sharp is a Florida native. She's also a former longtime reporter for USA Today. She covered all kinds of stories, murders, hurricanes, all the evil and destruction that one reporter can handle. Thankfully for all of us, Deborah decided to trade writing those gruesome news stories to writing fiction, specifically the very sweet, very funny Mace Bauer mystery series that is set in Florida. She's also written other short fiction and essays that have appeared nationally. You may have heard her commentaries on NPR, and you may have seen her on television. She's been on the Today Show numerous times. And you might ask, how does that happen? Unless you have the #1 bestseller on the New York Times bestseller list. She'll tell you herself, it doesn't hurt if you sleep with the right guy. Okay, she's been married for more than 20 years to NBC reporter Carrie Sanders. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
In the intro, I said that the stories were sweet and they were funny. They also have evildoers. There is always a murder, but they're humorous. And they're humorous in this way that, to me, only happens with Southern writers. Can you talk about that?
Well, you know, it's funny that I hope they are humorous. I hope they're humorous. I like to write about murder, except it always happens in the first chapter. Nobody gets autopsied in my books. You know, there's not like gruesome things happening. It's all off stage, and then the characters take over. And I do think that Southern writers have kind of a flair for these quirky, offbeat things that happen, and particularly here in Florida. Everybody who lives here knows that this state, you don't have to make this stuff up. It's as crazy as it comes.
It's Florida. It happens.
That's all
here.
you have to say.
Who was the first character? Was it Mace or was it Mama? The one you created first in your head.
Well, I have to say, in my head, the Mama character came first. And I had a very wise editor who said to me, a little bit of that Mama character goes a long way, because she can really drive everybody crazy. So we needed a straight man or a straight woman. So that became the middle daughter, Mace. And so the Mama character is the title character. She thinks she's the main character, but the Mace Bauer character is actually the main character. She's the narrator, and everything kind of happens through her eyes.
You know, I think that I identify with the conflicting sister personalities. Now, in the books, if you've read them, there are 3 sisters. Mace is the middle sister. And maybe it's because I was raised in the South. I still have a very active Southern mother who, like Mama, hates the squabbles between the sisters. Tell me about that. Tell me about Mace being the middle child.
Well, not coincidentally, I'm also a middle child, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff I do steal from my own life. I mean, my mother, for example, she likes to drink a little sweet pink wine, just like the Mama in the book. She gambles a bit with the Seminoles, and she drives my other 2 sisters and myself crazy. So a lot of that does come from real life. But I think that I'm glad you keyed in on the family relationships, because although I love the mystery, I love the puzzle of that, and I like hopefully entertaining people, I love the family aspect of it. How many of you have sisters? Just raise hands. Okay? I mean, you know what it's like. I mean, they know what buttons to push, right? But they also have your back. So I like the dynamics between the sisters.
I think that is what makes the book so sweet, because you do have this family dynamic. And yes, it's fiction, the story isn't real, but the dynamic is real.
Well, I hope so. I hope it comes across as real. I have people from all walks of life tell me, I have a character in my family just like that mama character. Or my older sister is bossy, just like that character Maddie is in the book. Although my older sister, I've had to tell her several times, no, that's not you. And she believes me.
They're going to ask for royalties.
Exactly.
There are 5 books in the Mace Bowers series so far. Mama Does Time, Mama Rides Shotgun, Mama Gets Hitched, Mama Sees Stars, and the latest is
Mama Gets
Gets Trashed.
That's
and
right.
by trashed, we're talking about a big trash dump.
Well, actually, all the titles are kind of double meaning. So when you say trashed, you also, she had a few too many sips of sweet pink wine to kick off the book. And that's when she manages to throw out the gigantic diamond wedding ring from husband number 5. So all the titles, so yes, there is a trash element, but there's also a trashed element.
Mama and Mace tend to get into a lot of troublesome predicaments. Do you want to talk about some of them in previous books?
Well, it's funny because this is a tiny little town, a town that I him or she. It's a lot like Okeechobee in the middle of the state, all sweet tea and barbecue and cattle ranches and rodeos. And it's like Okeechobee except smaller. And whenever I'm out in Okeechobee and I say that line, it's like Okeechobee except smaller. All the Okeechobeans say, is there anywhere smaller than Okeechobee? Right here, I made it up, called him or she. And, it's... yeah, I mean, more stuff happens in this little tiny town than happens on the mean streets of Miami, right? I mean, all of a sudden...
It's a lot of hanky-panky in that little town.
A lot of hanky-panky going on, and there's, a body turns up every book or so. So let's see. In number 1, in Mama Does Time, you'll see on the cover, there's a hand coming out of the trunk of Mama's turquoise convertible. Well, she stops at a Dairy Queen to get a butterscotch dip cone, and all of a sudden has a fender bender. Trunk pops open, revealing a body has been stuffed inside. Mama she cannot explain how it got there, so it ends up that she does a little bit of time until they iron things out. So Mace had to help her get out of jail on that one.
The setting is as important as the characters, and you created an entire town.
I did.
You just made it up.
Well, I did make it up, and I tell you, it sounds like that's really quite a feat, but it's actually the lazy way out, because if you use a real town, you're going to have readers writing you, emailing you, saying, Main Street does not intersect with Southwest 2nd Avenue. I don't know what you're thinking. The whole book could be a Pulitzer Prize-winning book, and they would key in on that little detail. So this way I can use some elements of the real-life Okeechobee, like they all gather at Gladys's Diner, which really does exist, and the lake is there, of course, which really does exist, but a lot of the other stuff I've made up to have a little more freedom.
Let's talk about this Florida, the real little Florida, which is not the Disney Florida, it's not the South Beach, Miami Vice Florida. This is the Florida you grew up in.
Well, it actually is, and oddly enough, this Florida was on the coast when I was a little girl. I mean, my father's family settled the little town of Davie, which is rural Broward County. Some of you might know that. And when I was a girl, I rode my horse through orange groves and past cattle ranches, and all the place was natural, and it was wild back then. And now it's all strip malls and subdivisions and giant superhighways. So when I came to set the book in Florida, I realized I couldn't do what I wanted to do in South Florida anymore, so I had to move it up north a little bit. So this is a place that's still completely wild, and I mean, it is only 50 miles or so from the coast, but it is a whole different world. It really is. How many of you have actually been out to that part of the state? You should take a trip out there. Go to the livestock auction or go hang out at Gladys's, and you'll see actual cowboys coming in with their spurs and their hats. It's wild.
Let's talk cowboys. Let's talk about this. The Cracker Trail.
Yes.
You rode the Cracker Trail.
What the heck was I thinking?
All right, let's explain what that is.
Okay, book number 2 is Mama Rides Shotgun, and it's set on the Florida Cracker Trail ride, which is an authentic ride. It happens every year. And when I was a journalist, I went out one afternoon, and it was the inaugural ride, so that was 20 years ago. More than 20 years ago. And even that day, I thought to myself, the cattle are all in this pasture, and there's these oak trees hung with you know, with Spanish moss, and there's fog, and you can just barely see the cattle in the distance. And I thought, boy, this would be a great setting for a murder mystery. 20 years later, I remembered. And so then I thought, well, maybe I should go out, you know, and revisit the Cracker Trail ride. Probably could have done it in 2 days to get the color. I did it for 6.
Woo.
Right? 120 miles across Florida, 6 days in the saddle, and we actually had a freeze that year in Florida. The water in the cattle troughs froze. So there I am, and I'm doing it old school. I've got a pup tent, and I'm sleeping in a sleeping bag on the ground, because I'm doing it like the Mace Bauer, this tomboyish, independent outdoors woman would be doing it. And then I look around me, and people have got big RVs, and they're watching satellite TV, and there I am like an idiot. You know, the first night in my tent, we had a storm. The tent actually blew out of the place where we were sleeping and into the cattle pasture, spooked all the cattle. Horses are, you know, neighing, and it was just like, oh my God. I really drew a lot of attention of the wrong kind to myself. But I wrote it. I rode the ride.
Nobody will accuse you of not doing the research for the book, but very little of that sounds attractive to me, I have to say that.
Well, actually, I rode every afternoon. The man who was photographing the ride would let me ride in the morning, and then in the afternoon he'd take over after he'd done some photographs. And they put me in a wagon that was drawn by mules. And you're sitting on a hardwood floor, and it's like this the whole time. And I'm thinking the horseback riding was actually easier than that mule wagon. So yeah, so it was not easy. My hindquarters didn't recover for a couple of weeks afterwards.
My guest is Deborah Sharp. She writes the Mace Bauer series. The latest in the series is Mama Gets Trashed. Mace herself is a very cool character. When you read it, she's fearless. So how much of Deborah Sharp is Mace?
Well, Mace is the idealized Deborah Sharp. Mace is the me that I would be if I were 20 years younger, 5 or 6 inches taller, a lot stronger, and you know, really fearless. I mean, I love nature. I go out and I walk in these nature paths, and I can spend the whole day out looking at birds and watching the sandhill cranes fly over. But I like to sleep in a bed, yeah, and have a nice hot shower. And Mace, it wouldn't matter to her. She could spend all the rest of her life out in the woods.
She does have one fear, and I think it's a fear of commitment.
Right.
I mean, you've written these books, and every one she gets closer to this gorgeous guy. He cooks. I mean, he's wonderful.
He's wonderful.
And what's with her?
I don't know. You know, I had to give her a fatal flaw, because you don't want to make your characters too perfect, because you want people to be able to empathize with them. And if she were just a strong, wonderful woman who's then lucky in love too, we'd all hate her. So I wanted to give her something that I think a lot of people, a lot of men actually suffer from. And because she's such a masculine character, I gave her that failure to commit, that fear of commitment. And I just love that about her. So I do keep getting them a little closer. That's part of her arc. She opens up a little bit, and she's getting a little closer, but not quite close enough yet.
I'm just saying, not all men are that patient.
True. I have to say, though, my husband, who is such a big ham, every time we'll do a book signing, if he's able to come, he'll always plant a question in the audience, and they will say, I understand that gorgeous detective character was based on your own husband, Carrie Sanders. And I'm saying, yes, Carlos Martinez, hot Latin hottie. Yeah, he was based on Carrie. Believe whatever you want, you know. No.
Here is one thing I love, and that is you changed careers, and you did so successfully at the age of 50. And that takes some kind of courage.
Yeah. Well, you know, it did actually, because I had a good career as a journalist all those years. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I ran all over. I did all the big stories of the day, you know, the terrorists living among us, the presidential meltdown, as many of you might remember here in Palm Beach County, you know, serial killers stalking children. And I had great, you know, front page access in USA Today. A lot of my stories, because of the quality of the news here in Florida, would run on the front pages of USA Today. But I just got so sick of being that person who shows up, and this would be me. Hi, I know a tornado has just blown through, or a serial killer has killed everyone you hold dear, but tell me, how do you feel? Didn't want to do that anymore. And so I started doing these books that are just a lot more fun to make people laugh, hopefully, than show up on the very worst day of someone's life.
There's one thing about being a reporter, and that is you don't bury the lead. But when you're writing a novel, you can't just put it all out there in the first page.
I tell you, I had a lot to learn, particularly having worked for USA Today, the home of the investigative paragraph, right? I mean, everything goes, you know, because it often gets cut right from the bottom. So you put everything that's important in that lead paragraph. I had to learn that not only do you not put it in the lead paragraph, you don't even put it in the first chapter. So my very first book, the first chapter was a page and a half. I had to learn a little bit about how to, you know, stretch it out a little bit. And that was, I think, maybe a little overconfident when I began, because I'm like, been a professional writer forever. How hard could it be? But it was actually hard, and I took a lot of writing classes, went to conferences, and learned how to become a fiction writer. It's a very different thing.
Do you always, and this is going to be a terrible question, do you always know where you're going?
Well, no, actually that's a good question, because, you know, they call it, are you a seat of your pantser or are you a plotter? So pantsers or plotters. I am definitely a plotter. I have a 35-page outline before I even sit down to write the first chapter. So I do know where I'm going. I let my characters kind of take some detours. In fact, in the first couple books, I changed the murderer like 2 or 3 times before the end of the book. But fortunately, as a mystery writer, these kind of mysteries, you lay enough red herrings, enough fake clues that it really could be anybody. So then I would just have to kind of pump up a little bit of a plot here and there. But yeah, I mean, I like to have the outline. I like to know where I'm going, but there are detours allowed.
We've talked about your husband a little bit, so I think everybody wants to know, how did you meet?
We met on a story, of course. My husband is 7 years younger than me. So when I first met him, we were out covering a freeze. Now, we used to work over in the Fort Myers area, and there's a lot of winter vegetable crops being grown in the middle of the state, the Immokalee area. And so we were sent out to cover a freeze, because it's a big deal with that whole winter vegetable crop. If we happen to have a rare freeze, it all dies, and the farmers lose a lot of money. So there we are. It's like 5:30 in the morning, waiting to see if the peppers are going to pop, you know, in the morning. And he kept talking to me, and I'm like, oh, this kid is so cute, you know. This cub reporter is so cute. But I had this typical print journalist snobism about TV guys. I would be, no offense, Ann, but I'd be like, oh yeah, those people show up, they put on some makeup, and they read somebody else's script. And so I was not at all interested. Well, this guy, if you've ever seen him on TV, you know he's very persistent. So he just kept after me and after me. Finally, he just wore me out. And I said, fine, I'll go out with you. First date, I went to pick him up. He lived with his grandmother. So yeah, he's come a long way.
He's come a long way. You could live anywhere, really, with his job and what you do. You could live anywhere, but you choose Florida.
Yeah, well, Florida is my home. I am a Florida native. Any other natives in the house? No. Never a single hand.
There never is.
I'm as rare as the endangered Florida panther, you know. Never a hand goes up. But I love Florida. And my mom, God love her, she's 99. She's still kicking. So I kind of feel connected to this area.
You are connected to this area.
Yeah.
Does it feel strange being on the opposite end of the microphone, as it were?
That took me a while to get used to. And when I do book signings, I often come in, and I did a little bit of that this morning, just to talk to people and ask a few questions. I feel so weird. Like, why are they interested in me when people are asking me questions? I want to ask questions about you or you. So yes, that does still feel a little strange.
Well, I want to ask questions about what I see down here.
I know.
Tell me what this
Well,
is.
I was telling Ann, I bring props, okay? Because my husband, he told me a few things when I first started doing these kind of public appearances, because I was a print journalist. I didn't even know how to put on makeup, okay? I mean, it was all stay in the background. Don't open your mouth. Just watch and observe what happens. So he first said, you know, we're going to put you on camera and I'll see how you do. So my very first attempt at trying to do a book signing was the book. I'm going to be reading a book, but I won't say a word because I'm afraid to look at anybody. And he's like, okay, first of all. And then he said, use props. If you're nervous, you can hold something up. So Ann asked about this. Now, how many of you have been to one of my book signings? I know there's a couple of you here. All right. I tend to dress the part, and I have to channel the mama character because I'm very shy, believe it or not. But when I channel this mama character, and so this one was for Mama Gets Hitched, and I ran around for 6 weeks with this idiot veil on my head and wearing a tacky wedding gown, too, at some of my book signings. And so in Mama Gets Hitched, she's tying the sacred knot of matrimony for the 5th time when, even before they pass the first pig in a blanket, somebody ups and kills her wedding caterer at the VFW hall.
Oh.
So what is a bridezilla to do? So I learned after that book, that was book number 3, I think. And so I learned that this thing weighs, believe it or not, about 5 pounds because it's just, it's got pearls and flowers and 5 pounds of tulle. So by the end of that book tour, this was my neck. I was like, yes, it really hurt. So my props got less and less heavy.
But there's little that you won't do.
No, I will do anything. I have no shame.
For this book,
yeah,
there is a photo of you in this giant trash can.
Yeah. You should have seen the test period at the Home Depot. My husband and I went to the Home Depot to see what trash can I could fit in. And I'm telling you, after 50, I know all of us know, get a little spread down here. So I'm looking at a nice, slender trash can. No way, not in crouched down. So we're pulling out cans in the Home Depot aisle, and I'm climbing in them, and he's like, okay, I don't think that one's that one's not high enough. And the people at Home Depot are like, what is he going to do to her? I don't know. So yes, I will do a lot. I will do a lot. But I bring along a few props about Mama Gets Trashed.
Show
Would you
us.
like to see
we
some
would.
of them? Okay. Well, the first thing I do when I try to get into, characters, I bring along wardrobes. So here's Mama's big giant diamond ring. This is the one she tosses out unintentionally with the trash. Mason her head off to the dump to try and find this ring. They find the ring, believe it or not, but they also find something they wish they hadn't. Scantily clad body of librarian Camilla Law. So the whole town of Himmershey is scandalized, not so much because of the body, because they've had a few of those before, but because of the way poor Camilla had been done up before she died, wearing sexy black leather, stiletto heels, complete with what looked like a dog collar around her neck.
And this is the librarian.
This is the librarian. So there's foul play and fetish wear in Little Himmershey, Florida, y'all, and Mama is blushing 50 shades of pink. All right, so I've got her ring. One other thing I always do, I hope this isn't a blue, this is Mama's favorite sweet pink wine in the to-go box, so I always pour myself a little tiny bit, maybe a little more. Have a couple sips of that. And get into the character.
But you only brought 1 glass.
I did. Well, if you could taste that, you would not want any more, believe me. Mama doesn't have very good taste in wine. And I also bring along, now I won't read, but sometimes I do read, and I bring along this. Because remember, they're in a dump. And so at one perfect moment in the story, there's a rat that runs over the toe of Mace's boot. And I bring that out, and the ladies in the front row often scream, and that really makes my day. So, so no, there is nothing I won't do to kind of get some attention.
It helps to be in costume.
It does, and especially in the beginning. No one will believe it now because I really do look like a ham, but I was terrified. I would go, if I was at Barnes & Noble or Borders, I would go in the bathroom and throw up before I had to speak. And so Kerry really did help me, honestly. He said, bring the props, it'll distract you from you're on stage. And also the one thing that I do, if anybody else is ever fearful of public speaking, is I meet people before I talk. And that way I've got some friends in the audience. So I do feel like I have some friends here today.
Will there be another Mace Bauer book?
Ooh, that's such a good question. And where's the answer? Well, this is the thing. I think that my publisher is very interested in another Mace Bauer book. And I know I've got a lot of readers who ask me, when is it coming? When is it coming? But I honestly started at age 50 and I said, I want to see if I can write a mystery, one mystery. I blinked, and 5 years later I had 5 books and a very demanding career. And I'm kind of thinking, well, now I'm 60. Maybe I want to slow down just a little. So I'm reevaluating.
Okay. I'm just saying because this could come in handy.
Oh, yeah? In Mace's, I know.
In her life.
Yes, I know. Everybody wants Mama to plan Mace's wedding, which would be a disaster, but would be so funny.
Oh, it would be such fun, such fun. Do you write every day?
When I'm writing, no. Not even, no, I'm lazy. I really am.
I love hearing
I'm kind of a slacker. I know you all must remember, because I love this show, but you remember Murder, She Wrote with Jessica Fletcher?
Yes.
And you used to see her riding her bicycle along the coast, and every once in a while she'd solve a murder, and then maybe every once in a great while you'd see her writing. That's kind of like my ideal of a writer, but I am very fast, so if I would let it go, then I can get it done really quickly at the end.
Well, we are so thrilled, number one, that you changed careers and that we got to know you in this setting because we adore the books. We adore the character.
Thank you.
Mama is such a treat for all of us. And you've been such a delight
Thank
to
you.
have here in Between the Covers today. My guest, the delightful Deborah Sharp, author of the Mace Bauer Mystery Series, the latest book, Mama Gets Trashed.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This has been Between the Covers, the WXEL Book Club, presented by WXEL and Murder on the Beach Mystery Bookstore in Delray Beach. I'm Ann Bocock. I want to thank all of you for joining us.